You're listening to the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I'm chatting with Janai Meyer about how to prepare for calm and confident breastfeeding before you've even had your baby. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, a registered dietitian, nutrition business coach, and online entrepreneur with over 10 years of experience in online business. And I'm here to show you everything I've learned about creating a life and a business that nourishes you. On this podcast, we'll talk about the lifestyle habits, practical strategies, mindset shifts, and leaps of faith required to build a healthy body, a powerful mind, a strong spirit, and a successful business. Hey there, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, and we have a very chock full of information episode for you today. And if you're anything like me and about to have a baby, then this is going to be so important for you. My guest today is a former client of mine that's worked with me inside of my Nutrition Business Accelerator program. And it's been really cool to watch what she has created, going from someone who served a lot of different types of clients to being able to more fully focus on her passion, which is helping women have healthy births and healthy postpartum periods. So my guest today is Janai Meyer. Janai mentors women through their life's journey from preconception, pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, and menopause. While her specialty is nutrition, birthing, and lactation, Janai's work extends beyond the realm of motherhood, presenting emotionally healthy solutions to physical well-being in the face of diet fads and stigma-driven inaccuracies. Janai holds 25 years of experience in the field of nutrition, lactation, parenting, and well-being, offering a unique opportunity for parents in Alaska to receive personalized, trained guidance as they navigate childbirth, breastfeeding, pumping, returning to work, bottle feeding, and growth and feeding needs from preconception into adulthood. With her widely applauded and recognized services throughout Alaska, Janai has helped hundreds of women reconnect with their own bodies in wisdom-bolstering wellness for adults and children alike. Her unbiased support, evidence-based knowledge, and trained understanding of medical options during pregnancy and birth, along with infant feeding, allows her to be the ultimate mentor to new parents in need of trustworthy guidance. So, like I said, Janai has a ton of expertise in a lot of different areas. She's a doula, so she helps women in labor, and she's a lactation consultant, which means she helps women learn how to breastfeed their babies after giving birth. So you can imagine, as someone who's pregnant, at the time of this recording, I'm about to go into my third trimester, that this topic was very, very interesting to me, and I learned a ton. So I'm excited to share it with you, and I hope that you learn just as much as I did. And I'm just really pumped to be able to share this information with my audience, because I really feel like this is an area of women's health that does not get talked about enough. And as someone going through this process myself, I know that I have a ton to learn. So I was just really, really glad that Janai could come on the show today and share all of her amazing wisdom. So without further ado, here is Janai Meyer. All right, everybody. Well, I am so pumped to have with us on the show today, Janai Meyer. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast, Janai.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah. And before we hit record, Janai and I were just kind of chit-chatting about some of the stuff that I myself have been exploring, because Janai's expertise is something that's very relevant to the current phase of life that I'm in. And since Janai and I worked together for a while, starting, it was like the beginning of last year, right? When we had started together. Yeah. And it was funny because when we were first working together, I wasn't pregnant, and I was like trying to come from when we were talking about your niche and who you were going to help and all of that, I was like trying to imagine what that would be like. And now that I'm actually in the stage of life that you help people with, it's like, oh, now I really get it. So it's kind of fun to have that perspective. So I would love for you to just share with our audience really quick about how did you get into this world of pre and postnatal nutrition. And I know, because you're more than just a dietitian, I think you're a doula and a breastfeeding consultant too.
Yeah.
So how did you end up in this area of health and nutrition? Since I know you have a lot of different areas of expertise, but this is the one that I know you're super passionate about.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I am originally trained as a registered dietitian. I did work a lot of years in pediatrics and also in diabetes. And when those two came together, actually, I was at a conference and they started presenting data about breastfeeding and the benefits of breastfeeding on the reduced rates of diabetes. And this big light bulb went off. And I'm like, that's where I need to focus my energy and my work. And so I started working on becoming an international board certified lactation consultant. It took me quite a few years, but that's where I've landed now. And I am so happy to be here. It feels right.
Mm-hmm. So did you have any personal experience with this that inspired your passion for it? Or was it more just that like light bulb moment that you had at the conference?
Well, what's interesting is I had a very difficult time breastfeeding my first son. And that was about 4 years before this light bulb moment. But I never connected the two until I started working more with moms and babes. I thought my experience was abnormal, that there was something wrong with me, that everybody else's breastfeeding was, well, picture perfect. And so then when I started working with families, I'm like, no, that's not the case. What happened to me happens to a lot of mamas, and the data is different, but like 60% of women don't reach their breastfeeding goals. We have to say why. What did they not know? What did they not get support-wise that didn't allow them to reach their goals? So, yeah.
Well, and I'd be curious to hear from your experience having worked with so many women in this situation, what would be some of the things, like when you say they're not reaching their breastfeeding goals, what would be some of those goals that you've seen people have that maybe they weren't able to achieve or were struggling to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, so it can span, a complete spectrum of 100% exclusively breastfeeding until baby chooses to wean. I mean, there's that experience. And then there's other women that just want to breastfeed until at the breast until they go back to work. And then they want to transition to pumping and introduce a bottle. There are other families, and I should include dad. This is a team decision and team support. So there are other couples that they don't want to put the baby at the breast at all. They want to pump from day one. That's what they're comfortable with. Combination of maybe infant formula and breast milk or at the breast, or just want to feed at night. There's just this, basically, I don't think there's any one plan that I've seen consistently. It varies greatly for the couple and what's best for the family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I ask that because that's been something that I've been thinking about myself. Like, what are my goals, right? Because I think that idea of exclusive breastfeeding until the baby's ready to wean is kind of that gold standard. And I apologize, you guys can hear my other baby right now. So just that kind of like picture perfect gold standard of the barefooted pregnant mama with her baby, like breastfeeding the whole time. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I know there's a lot of there is a desire on my part to have some level of that. But I've even been thinking about the fact that as the primary breadwinner in my household and, running a business, having a team that I have to support financially, there is going to be some stuff that I have to do differently than someone who's a stay-at-home mom. Because if I need to do a call with a client or, do a business trip or something, there's going to have to be some adjustments made versus just being able to breastfeed on demand. And so, even having conversations with women when they're asking me, what are you going to breastfeed? What are you going to do? How long is your maternity leave going to be? And all these questions, I'm like, oh my gosh, even just trying to figure out what is the pumping approach that I want to take, because there probably will need to be some pumping for my other goals to be able to be achieved. But then I've heard horror stories of that not working, or I went to the bottle and then now the baby doesn't want my breast anymore. And it's there's so much confusion that exists when you're talking to other women or just learning about this stuff. So that's why I asked that question. Cause I was I wonder, there's gotta be a huge spectrum of what women's desires are, just even knowing that I'm still trying to figure out what my goals are. And I'm sure they'll change when the baby's actually here. Cause I know there's only so much you can prepare for, right?
Yeah, a baby brings half of the feeding relationship to the breastfeeding, and we don't know what that's going to look like. Mm-hmm. And pumping is a good example of women's bodies just respond differently to pumping. Some women do better hand expressing than the best electric pump. It's so individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was kind of laughing at a friend who bought 2 different hand pumps. I had put 2 different hand pumps on my registry because I was like, they both have different but good reviews. She bought both of them and she's like, you might just want to have some options. So I bought you both. And I was like, oh, that's actually really thoughtful of you. Cause I was like, I'll just see which one people buy and then, take the other one off. But, just having the 2 options to see like, well, maybe this one works better. Maybe that one works better. And, just not feeling like, oh, if it didn't work with that one item, then there must be something wrong with my ability to pump.
Exactly. Yeah.
So as far as preparing for newborn stage in general, I know that a lot of what you focus on is feeding the newborn. And I know that it's not just, especially with breastfeeding, it's not just about feeding the newborn. It's also about the mother, right? Like the mother is producing the milk. And if the mother's health is not cared for, then that breastfeeding will probably be a lot harder. So what would be, for women like me, I'm about to be in my 3rd trimester actually on Sunday after this recording. So for women like me that are getting into our 3rd trimester, what would be some suggestions that you have for preparing to feed your newborn?
Yeah. And so I think the kindest thing that we can offer 3rd trimester moms is to have an understanding of what their anatomy is bringing to the breastfeeding relationship. That was a lesson for me that was really traumatic, even all these years away, is I didn't know that I had. So women can have technically 3 different types of nipples, and you can do a really quick home test for this, or you can ask your midwife or OB/GYN to do it for you. But the idea is knowing what your anatomy is, because that can affect what pump you might get or what position you might want to focus on when you go to latch the first time, how to hold the baby to allow that latch to be successful. So the nipple pinch test is a pretty easy one. You can Google it. I can help you find it. But if you have a nipple that comes smooth towards your breast or flat or goes concave, inverts, those are 2 types of nipples that can really cause some trouble, especially for the first time mama, the first couple of weeks of breastfeeding. And that is usually where they get so much information from well-meaning people, whether that's a nurse or a friend or an auntie, that it gets so overwhelming and confusing with the fatigue and the newness that a lot of times women just like, I can't deal with the stress, and they just stop the effort. So understanding that nipple anatomy piece can be really helpful to prepare.
Do you have any idea about like percentages of women who might have that? Or I don't, have they even researched this stuff? I feel like knowing the way that women's health works, I wouldn't be surprised if they have 0 data on this, but like, have you seen any trends as far as how common that is?
That's an interesting question. All these years, I've never seen data on. Yeah. But all I can speak to is my years doing it, and I would say 2 out of 10 women that come in here have an anatomy issue that needed a little bit of more education or positioning help with, or just a little bit of non-traditional support to get baby latched. And it's very, very, I do know it's very, very rare that the inverted nipple, there's different degrees of inversion. And so the more extreme inversion, the inverted nipple probably will never get baby on the bare breast. But wouldn't that be nice to know before you handed your newborn to breastfeed?
Yeah.
That other than, here's your baby. Oh, you can't breastfeed, which is what happened to me. Baby was put on my lap and the nurse goes, oh, you can't breastfeed. That nipple doesn't work. And I'm like, what? You mean that was the first time anyone said anything about my nipples not being good?
I mean, it's probably not something I'm sure I never thought about that as a thing to be paying attention to. So, and I'm kind of laughing because I follow Janai on Instagram, and I know that she has posted some really helpful videos about nipple testing and being aware of the nipple shape on Instagram. And I can only imagine the kind of comments you might get from people who don't want that information. But I was like, oh, this is like super helpful to know this. So, for those of us who Janai's actually trying to help, that information is actually really valuable. So yeah, that was something I had never even really thought of before. And I would imagine that would be extremely stressful if literally it's about to feed your baby and then somebody's like, never mind, you can't. So hopefully, that information can help some women avoid that. So it sounds like when you said that women with more of a severe nipple inversion would not be able to do a bare breast, but it sounds like there are still options for them, that it doesn't have to be just like, all right, you're doing formula. There's no breastfeeding that's going to happen here. Is that right?
Absolutely. Let the family have the options and the choices to decide. We have lots of, and I don't want to promote any one device, so I'm going to be kind of careful with that, but there are a lot of options to still provide beautiful breast milk to your newborn and also support that bonding relationship of having the baby at the breast. There are other ways to do that with some skin to skin and other adaptive devices that you can use. So absolutely.
Now, I actually want to back up some because I think you and I are talking with the knowledge that breastfeeding is beneficial. And there's probably some listeners here that don't necessarily know as much as I'm sure you, for sure, and then possibly even as much as me. What would be the reasons for a woman who might have a harder time breastfeeding to push through and to find a way to do it when formula would be probably an easier solution?
You know, I actually thought of this question yesterday. I'm like, she's going to ask me that.
Yes.
But is that, you know, everyone has different internal motivations. And so what is a benefit to me may or may not be a benefit to you or the next person. And this might be kind of a hot subject. No, it is a hot subject. I'm sure you've heard the concept fed is best, and it's a very hot subject. And I don't want to make it too hot here, but when you compare it to starving, that is a correct statement. Fed is best. But breast milk truly is an ideal nutrition for your newborn. That is the best source of nutrition. And since we both come from this health promotion, nutrition background, I look at it from that perspective as nutritionally, it is specifically made for your baby. Your baby actually gives you biofeedback when they're nursing through their saliva into your body to help regulate what they need nutritionally and how much. So the nutrition is the highest quality you can get. Yes, if you can't provide or have access to breast milk, there are other choices. And I support a family no matter how they decide to feed their baby. I just feel like all families should have all the information to make that choice on what they want to do. So pushing through. And the first month for sure, but that fourth trimester is really tough and it gets easier. So back to the plans, what do I do when I have to go back to work? Your time commitment and involvement in breastfeeding in that first month to 3 months is really intense, but it gets less intense and time feeding and it gets easier. So if you can make it through that first quarter, you're good to go. It's going to get easier. So that's a motivation. Overall health factors, we have things like enzymes are provided, antibodies, immune system support. And, we could talk about COVID right now and how we know that antibodies for COVID come through in the breast milk to protect the baby. Your milk nutrition changes for the age and stage your baby is at. Things like environmental, we talk about this. Does that speak to you about not having manufacturers making baby formula and the chemicals that produced and the waste of the cans and the botttos and that piece? Cost motivate you?
Yeah.
You might be throwing a little more groceries at mom, but I mean, cost wise, I live in Alaska and formula here is like $40 a can.
And just for like reference, how many cans might a baby need in a month?
A month, well, it depends on the age because they're going to use more. So a year is an easier way to look at it. So babies will use between 140 and 170 cans a year in the first year.
Wow. So
right.
More than 10 a month. So
right. And then there's food safety. We had a huge formula recall last month, and I did get heckled on social media for one of my posts about breast milk hasn't been recalled. But it's a fact, right? So, I mean, and then so it depends on the motivation to move through. It is hard at first. There is a learning curve for most families. It gets easier. The nutrition is actually the best nutrition you can provide. It's specific to your baby. And there's an overall health protection to that with the different factors in breast milk that protects the baby's immune system and the gut lining. I mean, it feels like this could be a whole conversation.
Oh, totally.
I just keep going.
Well, and I'm glad you addressed the fact that this is a controversial topic because I think this is something that I notice a lot, and I think this is like a cultural thing. It's not just around breastfeeding, but it's this idea that if you give somebody information that is not aligned with what they're already doing, that they interpret that as you're shaming me, right? So if you give them information about the benefits of breastfeeding and you make a strong statement that breast milk is the most nutritionally superior option for a baby, anyone who's not breastfeeding or, doesn't want to breastfeed, whatever, they can decide if they want to take on shame about that, because how you feel about the circumstance does not change reality. Right. And I totally understand there's people who need to use formula, want to use formula. That's fine. Right. thank God there is formula, especially for women that can't breastfeed for some reason, or their baby can't tolerate the milk or whatever. Like, obviously that invention is really valuable for certain circumstances. But I also think this idea that you can't be honest about like a scientific reality about breast milk literally being a completely different substance than formula because, oh, well, now you're mom shaming. It's like, how are we supposed to have conversations about like informed consent and, doing what you believe is best for your baby if you're not even allowed to share information that could help somebody make that decision?
That's exactly, you said that perfectly. Yeah, I support, and I have plenty of clients over the years that are formula fed, that are bottle fed. And I feel like that's my obligation to help them understand how to best bottle feed their baby. There's a technique to that, to honor baby's hunger and fullness. And I mean, I think that there's a space for everyone, however they choose to feed their baby.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just feel like there's so much stuff we probably don't know about breast milk. Like you were mentioning all of that biofeedback stuff, which that is fascinating to me. The fact that your baby's body can communicate with your body as the mom and literally change the composition of the breast milk. Like it makes sense why that would work that way from like an intelligent design perspective, but it's also kind of like, imagine all the things we don't know, right? Because I think sometimes with, the belief in science as being like the answer to everything, I think sometimes people forget that there's stuff that science hasn't discovered yet. Like we're not like at peak science where everything that exists in the world is understood and known. And, if science hasn't figured it out, it means it's not real or doesn't exist. So I do feel like there's probably stuff about how breast milk can benefit a baby that we don't even know yet. So even the stuff that we do know that you shared, I feel is really valuable. And again, if somebody knows that and they know that it's hard, it's not like we're saying, oh, if you're a good mom, this should be easy. And like, all of that would probably be mom shaming. But just to give information to say, hey, this is the reality of this, choice. And it doesn't mean you have to choose it, but we want you to at least know what you're choosing, because if you have certain goals, like, the healthiest baby possible, the best, hormone relationship with your baby possible, like all those things that can come from breastfeeding, if that's what your goal is, then that can be a motivator to work through the challenges that come and not just say, well, if they're the same, if they're nutritionally equivalent and there's no difference if I do breastfeeding versus formula, why would I bother doing breastfeeding, right? Because it's hard. It's probably, I would guess, finances aside, it's probably a lot harder than formula feeding to, put your body through that and to, figure out how to make that work. Is that accurate? I mean, well, I could be totally wrong.
I actually have I have friends and knowledge where it was absolutely smooth for a lot of women. So let's just throw that out there. It's like when you're pregnant, you tend to hear the horror stories,
right?
No one tells you, I had this most beautiful birth. It didn't hurt. I mean, how many times have you heard that?
I have a program that I'm going through that's literally called Pain-Free Birth that shares these stories, but I have not heard that from a real life friend or relative ever. So,
I mean, in the spectrum of life, there are women and babies that have smooth breastfeeding, no problem. Mm-hmm. Of course, my world is those that need an extra support and need extra hands. But I would say going back to the question you asked a few back, is being prepared is the other thing. Is there's a lot of transition with your body, particularly with your lactation coming in the first 2 weeks. That stages of lactation is absolutely critical. That I think that a third trimester, well-rested, exciting mom needs to understand what those normal stages are, because when you have that baby in front of you and you're looking at, okay, I'm healing from labor and delivery. I need to feed this baby like every couple hours. Oh, I need to clip those little tiny paper thin nails. And then there's a dirty diaper. And then, the busyness of being a new parent, you may not realize that what your body's going through stages of lactation can take 2 to 3 weeks. And as it changes, intuitively, you might be thinking something's wrong with me, and the easiest, quickest fix is just give a bottle of formula, because I know that I can check the box on that and I can worry about all these other things that I'm trying to do, like get a nap in, So, but if you know that it's normal, that baby's going to be just fine on colostrum alone until your milk comes in, and that colostrum helps move the meconium stool through, and it sets up your baby's gut lining for life. And if you just know that if I can just get through feeding colostrum for 3 to 5 days, that's still a benefit. And this is normal. So I mean, there's the stages of lactation, I think, is just as kind to explain to a mom who wants to breastfeed as knowing what kind of nipples she has.
Yeah. So I want to hear it.
Let's go. Okay,
what are the stages?
And also back to motivation. I do encourage families, if nothing else, to at least give a couple colostrum feedings in the beginning. It is a gram-positive liquid that sets up gut health for life. So I love that idea. A formula is gram-negative, and so if you could just get first feeding as colostrum. Colostrum, you're making it when you're pregnant in the 3rd trimester. It's high protein. It has a lot of prebiotics. And it doesn't take a lot, like 5 milliliters. Like just imagine a little tiny couple drops as a feeding. It doesn't take much. And as you mentioned, we talked about earlier, baby comes with these stores of energy, and so they can go a little bit without feeding. The average woman's milk comes in between day 3 and day 5. But when you look at the normal, it could be between day 1 and day 10. There's very few women and doctors out there, pediatricians, that are okay with mama's milk that hasn't come in by day 7, but that's still within the normal bell curve of normal, right? And so when your milk starts to transition so colostrum is a very thick, like honey-like looking liquid, and your breasts pretty much feel like they do when you're pregnant. They won't feel different. As your milk transitions day 3 to day 5 into it's endocrine-driven or hormonal transitional milk, at that day 3 to day 5, the milk arrives fast. And so when it comes in fast, that's normal engorgement. That's when the breasts fill up. That's when the mother can start to feel the heaviness. They might see leaking. It might actually start to look a little bit like what we expect milk looks like. And when the breasts get that full, that is driven by hormones. That is not a supply and demand stage because you haven't had much demand yet for the breast. And at this point, most moms are home. If they didn't deliver at home, they're home, and they don't have their team of nurses and doctors around them. So that's probably also the most common time when, if latching was going well in the hospital, this natural engorgement, latching can become very difficult because the breast is full. The nipple does kind of get a little harder to find, and it's not as soft to pull. And so latching can become an issue, and mom's just uncomfortable. And so the idea is at this stage is that you want to keep your breast as emptied as possible for the next week or so as your body moves into stage 3 or mature breast milk, because what you're doing right now is your body's trying to figure out, does this woman want me to continue to produce breast milk? I've got everything on full, and the faucet is full open. Do you want it? And the more you empty it, the more your body sort of locks in maximum milk supply at this point. And so some women have no trouble with the baby keeping the breast empty. They're trying to baby's trying to regain birth weight. So they're nursing all the time. Other women may have to use something like a hand expression or a pump to empty their breast. And then right around week two, this natural engorgement will start to drop off. It won't feel as full. It won't be as heavy. It won't be as leaky. And the number one comment I hear from moms is, I introduced a bottle because I didn't feel I had any milk supply. My milk's going away.
Oh, yeah.
Because they go from this normal overflooding of engorgement to moving into supply and demand milk at week 2, and they feel less. So they think baby's getting less. And so just knowing that you're going to feel overfull, that's going to decrease about 2 weeks, 3 weeks postpartum. You're going to feel less full and heavy. And it doesn't mean your milk's going away. You're just transitioning into your supply and demand stage of breastfeeding, mature breast. Did that make sense?
Yeah. And actually, so it's funny because I'm trying to do a little filing cabinet shuffle around the things that I've seen before, because I'm still, a little bit away from totally diving into the postpartum stuff. But I feel like some of and I don't know if this is friends' comments or things that I've seen online, but it's almost like this fear of if the milk gets too much, that if I empty it, then I'm training my breast to overproduce, and then it's going to be a problem. So, and I honestly think some of this is being in these pregnant women Facebook groups or something where they're talking to each other. But I'm curious what your perspective is on that, because it sounds to me like in that first couple of weeks, you having that excessive, I don't want to say excessive production, but maybe it feels excessive, or maybe it feels like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. and I don't want to encourage this to keep happening. So I'm going to like, just like sit it out and like let my boobs hurt and, hopefully not get like mastitis or something. Is that even a thing? Is that like just, and like I said, I'll let you know in 3 months how things are going for me. But this is all just like, wait, I feel like I've heard people say this before where they're concerned if they pump too much or if they like do anything beyond what the baby is breastfeeding, that's actually going to train their boobs to like make too much milk. And then they're going to be at risk of like mastitis or, just discomfort all the time. So
yeah.
Does that question make sense?
Absolutely makes sense,
Okay.
which actually goes great to my concept of knowing the stages of lactation, because you have to know what stage of lactation the mom's in to answer that question correctly.
Yeah.
Right. So if they're less than 2 weeks, I usually use the 2 weeks mark because that's usually when baby returns to birth weight. So that kind of is a nice little lineup for the mom's brain. If it's less than 2 weeks postpartum, you want to keep your breast as emptied as possible. You're not in supply and demand system yet. You're not in a place where if you demand more, you're going to increase your supply. You are trying to tell your body and your brain, I want as much milk as my body can make cells working and open. So when I move into supply and demand stage, if baby needs more because they're older, then my body has the ability to make more down the road. And so I work with women too that don't want to breastfeed. So part of my job is to help them ease through this engorgement and shut down milk supply calmly, but also safely, so they don't get mastitis or have any concerns. And so we actually do have them slowly express their breasts less and less over the first 2 weeks, so they don't have any painful normal engorgement at that first week mark. If a woman was past the 2 to 3 weeks mark, and I've seen this happen and they were concerned they weren't going to have enough breast milk for their baby because maybe latching wasn't going well, or maybe they had some sort of trip or medical procedure coming up and they wanted to make sure they had some. So they're feeding the baby on demand and then they're pumping. So they're basically asking their body to make twice the amount of milk that it would make for the one baby. And then all of a sudden they stop one of those. They either stop feeding the baby or stop pumping. You could have potential for plug ducts. Mastitis is not normally more engorgement issues. So I mean, it just depends on, so knowing which stage of lactation you're in and knowing, yes, if I demand too much from my breast by baby or by pump, I could have a problem with engorgement after 2 weeks. That could have a negative consequence. If it's less than 2 weeks, you need to let your body know, I want milk for the long term. So let's just get it turned on, brain and body. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, that's helpful. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I haven't really done a lot of the education at this level yet because I've been focusing on learning how to actually get the baby out in the first place. But it's something that I wonder, if somebody's not working with a lactation consultant, I'm guessing they would probably go in one or two directions. One being just, oh, I feel overly full, let me get some out. Or, well, I heard if I overexpress or if I give too much of the milk or get too much of it out, that's going to cause me to overproduce and it's just going to like keep this problem going or something. So it's really interesting to know it's so time sensitive that like what you do actually is dependent on the stage of breastfeeding that you're in. And you would actually maybe do opposite or very different methods depending on where you're at. So that's interesting. I think because I think this has come from just women talking to other women, not actually experts sharing their opinion. It's like, I could see that being a big point of confusion for a lot of women because they don't actually know that it's different.
Right. Yeah. And, and that's, like I said, that 2 week mark when that engorgement goes away, that's what people think that their milk supply is going away instead of just transitioning into the next stage. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd love now to talk a little bit about the baby-led feeding piece because this is something I saw. I'm following all these accounts now about like babies and all the stuff that I'm like kind of doing a crash course on. And I remember seeing a post recently where they were saying how, when people talk, like a doctor might tell you, you need to feed your baby every 2 hours. And it's like this very much like 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours. And then they showed another diagram of it being like what it actually looks like. And it's like 30 minutes, 3 hours, like back and forth, like where it's like this very, intermittent, like not on a schedule kind of thing. So when somebody's, especially in the first couple of months when it sounds like, learning all of this is the most challenging, what might be something to expect with that? Because, like I know a friend of mine whose wife just had their second baby was saying, oh, it's like every 90 minutes, go for 30 minutes. And that's the schedule. And I don't know if some people are teaching more of a schedule for babies, but I'd love to hear what your perspective is on that, because I'm sure I don't know if this is another controversial topic, but I could imagine that maybe it would be if there's any sort of differing opinions about it.
Parenting and birth and babies is just controversial, and so we'll just throw that all in there. Yeah. So I come from a strong, long background of intuitive eating, and honoring those hunger and fullness cues. And I think that nowhere do you see them stronger than in a newborn baby. And so honoring those, whether you're feeding by breast or by bottle, this should be honored. And that's something else that I think is a kind thing to teach new parents before baby is put in their car seat and sent home is how do typically newborns communicate hunger and fullness? Because, we need to understand that, because we need to honor that. That's part of the trust relationship that you're building with your newborn. Like I said, regardless by breast or by bottle, understanding that. And so to answer the question, scheduling, I'll say this. Newborns, and I don't care how they're being fed, should not be fed on a schedule. They will find a routine, and this is where the baby led is. The baby will find their own routine, and they have the right to change that routine at any time. And so that's the difference between the word routine and schedule to me, is thinking like schedule is it's adult led, because it's convenient to me and this is what I need you to do, versus the baby led is they're following their intuitive needs for growth and nutrition and comfort. And because breastfeeding at the breast is more than just nutrition, it's that bonding comfort piece. So your baby, but you need to know what you're following to help that baby set up their routine for today. And the newborn baby really does. And the mother also, moms transfer milk to their babies at completely different rates. So if you, and babies feed at different rhythms. Have you ever had dinner with someone and they eat really, really fast or really, really slow compared to you?
I'm usually the slow one. So,
okay. And so then you're kind of out of sync a little bit. Well, and I find this interesting, just observations over the years is that a lot of times if there's a mother who's sort of like a fast eater and she's got a baby who's a slow nurser, it's kind of this mismatch with the rhythm of feeding. And so some babies feed really fast and can move milk really fast. So they're like an 8 to 10 minute on the breast and they're off. Other babies are sort of like, I'm going to nurse and then look at you and then I'm going to take a nap and then I'm going to finish nursing. There's just this slow process. And that's just personality. And that's part of the relationship. So to make I guess to kind of get to the end of the story is you have to, watch the baby. And there are some cues that you can kind of key on, but after the first couple days, you're going to know your child better than anybody else and know what they're trying to tell you about. No, I really just need you to hold me. No, I'm cold. No, I really am hungry right now. No, I just want to suck for fun, because babies will suck for non-nutrition reasons. And people think every time they're sucking or turning to root, we got to feed them. It's like, not necessarily, babies lose rooting at 4 months old. If it was truly a hunger signal, they'd have it until they could talk. Right. But they lose it at 4 months. So they don't root forever. So I think that's also a kind thing to explain to parents is what are some typical signs that baby's full and what are typical signs that they are ready to eat again. And newborns will at the breast, it varies, but we say every 2 to 3 hours. They could be at the breast 20 to 45 minutes. I also like to try to arm new parents when they go to meet their pediatrician. When the pediatrician asks, how long does baby nurse? The response is they actively suck at the breast because they could be hanging out at the breast for 45 minutes, but they're only actively sucking for 20 minutes of that. So they don't get credit for breastfeeding for 45 minutes if they're only sucking for 25 minutes of the 45-minute session on mom's lap.
And I would guess that a really long, like if a baby's actually taking that long to breastfeed, it might be a sign of something being not great or not healthy.
It can be interpreted that way. That's why I like to throw in the word actively sucking. Arm parents with that. And then of course we check all the other items, wet diapers, dirty diapers, color of dirty diapers, weight gain, how mom is doing. There should be no injury to mom on the breast or nipple. That's an indication of not good transfer. Milk's not transferring well. I got lost in the question. I went down this path and I forgot what the question was.
I was just curious because, like, I know I've seen a lot of people talking about things like tongue ties recently, and I'm just curious, if a baby is actually at like sucking for a long period of time, could that be an indicator that it's not being as productive as it should be, and there could be a problem?
Actually, the mother can actually take this on. And so I'll explain it this way. So when a baby initially latches, the baby has to pull that whole tissue back to the back of their mouth, right? Past the hard palate to the soft palate. And so if you give the baby 5 to 6 sucks to get the nipple back there, and if the mother's nursing and the mother feels a pull or a tug, but not a pinch. And I see this all the time. If a mother's nursing like this and she's got her ears, her just tense body, I'm like, does that pinch? She's like, yeah, it pinches, but I'm just going to tolerate it. The pinch is a good indication that baby is not got a good latch, a deep latch. They're not moving milk.
Mm-hmm.
And so a pinch is an indication that the baby is got a shallow latch. It's causing pain and pinch issue to you. It's decreasing the amount of milk baby needs, which means they're going to linger and stay on the breast longer, and they're going to want to come back. And then the mom's going to pull that baby off the breast, and it's going to be a red nipple. It could have a crease or a line on it where the shallow latch was. So the mom has a lot of early indication that the latch isn't going well, baby's not moving milk well before baby gets to extra long feedings.
Mm-hmm.
Did that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Oh my gosh, there's so much to learn about this. And then with the baby-led feeding process, understanding hunger and fullness cues, does that change if it's breastfeeding versus bottle feeding?
No, not really. Especially the first 4 weeks. Newborns are really clear. And I know we're doing a podcast, but we're audio, so I'll try to describe it when I'm saying it. But there are actually around 3 stages of notification for hunger for infants. And I always set the stage with when your newborn is sleeping, when they are just beautifully still and quiet, no movement, no noise. The first time you hear a grunt or a movement out of that deep sleep, that is actually technically early hunger signaling from a newborn. Eyes could be closed, and what you'll see, and they'll move their head back and forth, and they'll start to grunt a little bit. And what that means is the baby's starting to wake up, and it's hunger that's driving that. Well-meaning family members, grandmas, aunties will usually say, baby's starting to wake up, he or she's going to be hungry soon. And I always reframe that. No, they're hungry now, and especially if you're learning to breastfeed, you want to get your baby up. Yes, I'm asking you to wake up a sleeping baby. Get your baby up, check the diaper, get him to the breast, get your water bottle, your phone charger, your snack, everything that is the breastfeeding space. If you let that baby continue on with that physical awakening, they will quickly become more and more verbal, more and more agitated. But what you'll see them go from open hands, they'll start to form fists. And the fist will start to come up by under their chin and their mouth. And when you have a baby that is very verbal, could be crying, grunting, groaning with tight fists over by their mouth, this is overstimulated, overhungry baby. And if you've ever heard a baby say, mom say, I'm fighting baby's hands to get them fed, and they're crying, this is too stressed. This is too stimulated. Mm-hmm. Baby is not going to settle down well for a feed, or they're going to feed too fast. Mm-hmm. And so the best thing you could do is calm the baby down, which some skin to skin or soothing or rocking. You want a baby to have quiet, calm alert for feeding, which is, I call soft fists held mid-body. That is sort of the calm hunger that we talk to adults about, Mm-hmm. And then when they're full, first of all, you can never overfeed a baby at the breast. You can overfeed a baby by bottle. So this is more important for bottle. To know that they're done, babies will disengage feeding on the breast. They just stop sucking because they're in charge of the flow. It's pretty easy. But what you'll see with the hands, so if tight hands and fists up by the face are overhungrily overstimulated, when you see hands open and just kind of drop down by the baby's butt, I call them noodle arms, they just kind of flop. That is a full baby. And you can use that for bottle fed. Bottle fed babies, there's a technique called paced bottle feeding that tries to give that flow and control back to the baby being fed by bottle. And it's a little bit harder to explain verbally, but basically you instead of a gravity drip bottle just going drip, drip, drip down a baby's throat, you actually encourage them to engage the bottle to pull the flow. And when they pause, because babies will suck, pause to swallow and breathe, then you stop the flow of the milk in the bottle so they can clear their mouth, they can swallow, they can breathe. And then if they start to engage the bottle again, then you bring the flow of milk back up. So you're basically baby led. The baby is leading if and how much. I guess I could have said that. I guess I could have said that first. But, the idea is in watching those hunger and fullness cues, like if you have a baby come off the breast and they're still like really intense and fisty and not calm, you're like, we're not done here, right? That we're not done here. But if a baby, is all I call open arms, relaxed arms, noodle arms, they're done. You can't get another drop in them.
Yeah.
So.
It's so funny because I feel like, again, I don't spend a lot of time with babies, so all of this is like so new for me. I feel like there's this perception that the way a baby's hungry is that they're like crying a lot. And I wonder, and I always want to be careful about this because, again, we were talking about mom shaming before, and I never want to ever do that to people because that's not my core values to shame other people. But I've heard like some friends of mine talking about how their baby is just like screaming all the time. And I wonder if, and again, I have no idea, right? Who knows? But I wonder if part of it could be if they don't know the early signs of hunger, that by the time the baby's even getting fed, they're kind of like already in that like super stressed state. And even if you feed them, maybe it's like they're still like stressed. I don't know if you have any perspective on that because, it's one of these things where when you're a new mom that's pregnant and people are telling you these stories, you're like, I don't think all babies just scream all the time. So I can't imagine that this is like just a baby thing. I feel like there might be an explanation for that. And I would love to hear your perspective because I could be totally wrong and just totally oblivious and in for a rough transition in the next couple of months.
I think, from a feeding only sort of perspective, not looking at a sort of medical reason of what's going on. I think that sometimes you can't get the baby fed before they get elevated stress and crying. But what I do find, and I'm talking about the baby under 3 months old, that fourth trimester, even under that 4 weeks old, the question about the crying is that, they're going to have some verbal, but when we talk about growth, right, this is a huge growth period for them, especially returning to birth weight. And it's very intense drive to feed and to eat. And a lot of times babes will, if you weren't able to get them fed before they elevated, which if you're in the car or you're driving somewhere, or something's going on, you may not catch them early hunger all the time. And
or you're asleep, right?
Right. Yeah. You just don't catch them and that's fine. And they're there. The best recommendation is to do some sort of soothing, skin to skin, to get them back to mid hunger. But if you can't do that and they feed anyway, either way they feed, they have just expended a tremendous amount of energy complaining to you, basically. Something's wrong. Let's say it's feeding. And so they tend to run out of enough energy to do a complete feed. So they will short feed. And this is where knowing the other side of what hunger is, know what fullness is, because and feeding at the breast takes a lot of work. It's way more work for the baby, energy wise, expenditure wise, than bottle feeding. And so the baby will expend a lot of energy communicating by crying in this intense motion. And then when they finally get fed, they just feed to where they take that edge down, but not all the way full. So then they cluster feed. So they'll come back at you crying again because quickly that stomach got emptied and they're back at you. So it's just like this domino effect. So, and in the beginning, if you can just catch them at a couple early hunger and get them completely full, you can stop this train and kind of calm it down. And then if it does happen because you weren't able to get there early, you know what you need to do. You need to let them take I call a little nutrition nap. They've burned their energy. They've gotten half full. You can see they're showing you signs they're not done, and just plan in the next, I'm going to throw in the next 45 minutes or so. Some guy's going to come back at me for the second course. They're still hungry and we need to get back on our routine, not our schedule. Get back on our routine because babies are really clear about that, but they expend energy communicating with us at a crying level. And we'd rather have them conserve their energy crying and feeding. And I agree with you. I just want to iterate. I'm not shaming anyone, but I feel like, especially from my own mother perspective, I wish I had this information in my head when I was raising 2 little boys, because it would have helped me a lot to navigate some real stressful stuff.
Yeah. Well, I even imagine with that whole cluster feeding thing that, if the baby kind of disengages a little bit, the mom might be like, oh, they're probably done. And, go put them back to bed or, whatever. And again, I have no idea. What do people do after feeding a baby? Like you just put them down? I'm not sure. But if you have those fullness cues that you're looking for and you notice that hasn't happened, maybe it's an opportunity to just like hang out for a bit and say, okay, let's see what happens. And, maybe it takes a minute for them to relax, or maybe they like want to go back to your breast. And it's, I think it's funny because I feel like we're the kind of people that just are so scheduled and like routine focused. And I tend to be like that. So this is good for me to know going into this, that it's like, okay, the baby's done. I got to like get back to what am I doing? Or I got to get back to sleep or whatever. And if, you start to fall asleep and then 20 minutes later, it's like the baby's up again, that would probably be pretty stressful if you're like, I just fed you and you were done. So I feel like that fullness cue would be something that if women don't know what to look for, could be a big stress reliever when they're actually able to pay attention to it and able to make decisions about what to do with the baby before it turns into like a scream fest.
Yeah. And can I add one thing on that is that, I mentioned about the sucking rhythm and active sucking, and, especially that newborn under 4 weeks old, is that so our milk normally comes in a 4 milk, which is a low fat, and then it transitions into a higher fat towards the end. Fat is the last macronutrient to be pulled out of the breast. So the nutrition changes throughout the breastfeeding. And so babies will suck very fast and engaged in the beginning of the feeding when they're getting 4 milk. It's a very usually 2-to-1 suck, suck, swallow, breathe, suck, suck, swallow, breathe. But then, and so parents are like, yeah, we're nursing. This is going great. There's action, right? But babies will slow down halfway between the feeding and they will pause, kind of snooze, but not let go of the breast, baby led, right? If they're on there, there's a reason. And that's kind of when that biofeedback is really starting to kick in and the fat is starting to be pulled out of the breast, And so babies, the second half of the feeding will be very slow. Suck, suck, swallow, snooze, breathe. It's much slower engagement. And I find a lot of parents and moms get really anxious and nervous that the baby's not actively sucking like they were. So they'll pop them off one breast and put them on the other one to get that fast flow again.
Oh, yeah.
And so you're basically giving I call it the 4 milk being, if you're looking at courses of meals, it's like your salad course, right? Versus your dessert meat course. So it's like, and so they don't get the full complement of nutrition because mom's looking for that faster engagement. But the normal rhythm is to be fast for the first half of the feeding, be super slow for the last half of the feeding, and trust your baby, trust your body, trust the process. The baby will not overfeed at the breast. And the opposite to that is if the baby's still suckling, they need something from you, and just be patient with that.
Mm-hmm. That's really important because I feel like, it's kind of that difference between like skim milk and I don't know if it's quite heavy cream at the back, but if they're not getting any of that fat, that could be, talk about getting hungry frequently. You're going to be a lot hungrier if you're missing out on fat and calories that you needed. So, well, I feel like I'm sure I could ask 1,000 new questions about this because obviously I have so much knowledge to share. And as someone who needs to learn more about this, I am like fascinated. I would love if we could just wrap things up with a quick tip for dads or partners that are not, the one that is producing the milk. Because obviously like the person who had the baby is probably the one that's going to be breastfeeding. And then the one who is in the partnership will be supporting. How can that person help? Because I know this is something that has definitely come up with me and my husband where, my intention is that he will be able to help and that I'll need him to be able to help. And even like, we're talking about certain business trips that I have tentatively on my schedule this year. I'm like, you're going to literally be with the baby like all day for those days. So what tips do you have for dads and partners that are not the ones that are creating the food?
Yeah. And I'm going to focus this on that 4th trimester. I think that's a real critical transition piece for everybody. And as you and your partner have learned, as your partner has learned to support you during pregnancy, right? Your energy level has changed. Your appetite has changed. Your emotions can change. I mean, your partner has adapted through the entire pregnancy to what you need to keep you well and nourished so you can grow this baby. I encourage partners to think about that same mindset the 4th trimester. How can I continue to support my wife and my newborn as she continues to nourish our baby this first trimester. And so there's going to be this, and not separate the two. There's pregnancy and those postpartum. Consider that fourth trimester part of that nourishing my partner, supporting her. And whether that's making a nice little, I like to have breastfeeding like nook snack areas. And I encourage the partner to get their favorite snacks and drinks right there. Make sure the phone charger's there, just have it set up. But realizing that there will come a time and place when the partner, if you choose to pump or bottle feed, will get an opportunity to do that. But the best thing a partner can do is participate with skin to skin with our newborn. And I know this isn't quick, but I'm going to get to it. We know that skin to skin with both mom and dad increases the baby's temperature and decreases the baby's breathing or respiration, soothing in its finest. But when we know that when dad does that, I'm talking 10, 15 minutes, when a dad does skin to skin holding with his newborn, it increases baby's digestive activity and enzymes. So they have
only with dad or just in general?
With dad. Mom has a whole other relationship with that. And that is actually part of smooth feeding. So they don't have gas and indigestion. And so I always tell dads, get in there, get your digestive cuddle times in with your baby. So then when the baby goes back to breastfeed with mom, when mom does it, it's an oxytocin response and a milk supply response. But digestion, dads can help with digestive by just doing some heart-to-heart, skin-to-skin time.
That I've literally never heard that before. So I'm definitely doing that with my husband. I was like, wait a second, are you saying it's only with the dad? That's so interesting. So yeah, I'm really fortunate because we retired. I don't know if retired is the right word, but we brought my husband home from his full-time job last year. And part of that was in preparation for getting pregnant. And I know not a lot of women have that luxury of having the husband around for even the full fourth trimester, let alone like past that. So, I say fortunate. It was also a lot of effort on our part to get to a place where that was possible, but it will be really cool to be able to have him so involved, because I would imagine something that can make it a lot harder is when, dad's gone the whole day and then the sleep at night. It's like the baby doesn't have an opportunity to bond with dad, and then maybe dad can't soothe the baby as well over time. They maybe not be able to feed them. They may not understand this whole hunger fullness cue if they even are feeding them. So I can see that would be really, really important to make it a true partnership activity and not just like, oh, well, you're the one with the breast, so you're going to figure it out and I'll just feed you or something.
Change diapers, right? I'm the diaper changer. Yeah.
Well, Janai, I really, really appreciate this selfishly as well as for my audience. So I'm so glad that you could come on today and talk about this really important topic. And it's very clear to me that you have an insane amount of knowledge about it. And I don't know if it makes me more nervous, oh crap, I don't know. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But just being someone who I consider myself a highly educated person around health and women's health and all of that. And to just hear all of this, I'm like, wow, this is really amazing how much there is to learn. So I know that anyone in our audience who is going to get pregnant at some point, or maybe wants to have another baby and wants to do it more effectively this time, they struggled with their first or previous babies, then I know this is going to be really valuable for them. So I would love to share with our audience an opportunity to connect with you if they want to learn more from you, because I know that you have a lot more to share and a lot of support to offer. So how can our listeners get in touch with you if they want to learn more and to get support with this very unique and important phase of life that they might be going into?
Yeah, thank you for asking. You can find me directly through my website. I think we can probably link that to the notes at janaimeyer.com. But I would love to share with you what I call as a unique postpartum planning guide that you do in your third trimester with your partner. And it kind of covers some of these areas, but it also explores the idea of how do you want to feed your baby and how is that going to look? So it rolls in that postpartum transition with your partner, but also the feeding relationship. I'm happy to share that with everybody. They just let me know if they'd like to have the postpartum planning guide. I'd be happy to share it.
Yeah, I definitely want it. So I'll be hitting you up for that. And if somebody was interested in working with you to get your help with this, what would be their next step?
Yes, please reach out to me in any media that you find me out on, Facebook or Instagram or through the website. I do offer a complimentary sort of just call, let's chat, see if I'm a good match for you. Call, we can do that. You can schedule that right through the website as well.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to link to her website as well as where to book a call if you guys want to work with Janai, since as you know, if you're anything like me, you might be like, oh my gosh, there's so much more for me to learn. And I want to do this the right way and not be, trying to figure it out after problems have already started. So we'll definitely link to that. And we'll make sure that you guys have what you need to get that postpartum planning guide, because again, I don't know about you guys, but if you're anywhere near having a baby like I am, it's probably something that you're like, yes, please, I definitely want that. So, well, thank you so much, Janai. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you and to pick your brain about this and to learn more. And again, I feel like my brain is just exploding with all of this information. So I know that we have a lot of listeners out there that benefited a ton. So thank you so much for sharing so generously.
Thank you, Laura. This was a lot of fun. Thanks.
Yay. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks to those of you for hanging out and talking about boobs and nipples and babies and stuff. Always a fun topic. And we'll see you here next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Hey there, Laura here again. Are you a health or nutrition entrepreneur who wants to start or grow an online business? And are you feeling stuck, frustrated, or even downright scared to take the next step towards your dreams of entrepreneurship? Trust me when I say that I've been there before and that you are not alone. I've been running my own online business since 2014, and I started my website and blog just about 10 years ago. And over the past decade, I've learned a lot and made a lot of mistakes when it came to creating the multi-six-figure business I now run today. And if there's one thing I've learned since starting my business, it's that you don't have to figure out how to transform your knowledge, expertise, and passion into profitable online courses, digital products, and memberships on your own. Contrary to popular belief, becoming an in-demand expert in your business isn't about being egotistical or selfish. It's about having a deep commitment and a burning desire to help others. And if you're not growing your business successfully, there are hundreds and maybe even thousands of people out there who are missing out on the opportunity to get the amazing help and support that you were born to provide. You're here for a purpose, and if helping people improve their health by running an online business is one of your purposes, then I have an exciting opportunity that'll help you build your business even faster and easier than ever before. My world-class business coach, James Wedmore, is going to be opening the doors soon for his game-changing online program called Business by Design, which helps struggling service-based coaches and course creators transform their businesses from the inside out so they can experience the time and financial freedom they desire while having a bigger impact on the world. In this one-of-a-kind program, James shows you exactly what keeps most business owners stuck and struggling and coaches you through the 5 key areas that you need to focus on to overcome whatever is standing in the way of your success. His program also provides a wealth of how-to and instructional content that will help you execute every important task in your online business, from running a launch to hiring your first VA and everything in between. I consider BBD my business Bible, and I've seen health and nutrition entrepreneurs become wildly successful in their online businesses through applying what James teaches, both from a strategy and a mindset perspective. And these kinds of results are possible for you too. Now, if you don't know James Wedmore, he's a self-proclaimed serial entrepreneur who has built multiple 7- and 8-figure businesses in multiple niches. He's also one of my favorite coaches and mentors that I've ever worked with, and he's helped me completely transform my mindset around business so I can grow my income and my impact while also working less and enjoying life more. The financial and time freedom I've experienced has been life-changing, and I want you to have that experience in your business as well. So if you're ready to start taking charge of your business and your life, go to lauraschoenfeld.com/BBD waitlist to learn more about James's amazing online program, Business by Design. And if you choose to join BBD under me using one of my affiliate links, you'll also receive bonus coaching from me, plus additional training content covering tools and strategies that are specific to nutrition and health entrepreneurs who want to start, grow, or scale their business to 6 figures and beyond. These are my gifts to you absolutely free when you enroll in Business by Design using my affiliate link. So don't miss your chance to learn the business strategies that have truly changed my life and the lives of thousands of other online entrepreneurs. It's time to step into the role of confident CEO in your online health and nutrition business. And I can't wait to support you on your journey to becoming the successful health entrepreneur you were born to be. Go to lauraschoenfeld.com/BBD waitlist to get on the waitlist, and you'll be the first to find out when the doors to Business by Design are open.